Testing.
She's still early. Is it Allison?
Good evening. Welcome to the meeting, the special board meeting of the Village Board of Skokie for Monday, November 14, 2022. It's my pleasure to introduce our Deputy Village Clerk, Sylvia Luke, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The meeting will come to order, and the clerk will please call the roll.
Trustee Sutker?
Here.
Trustee Robinson?
Here.
Trustee Kuhn?
Here.
Trustee Johnson?
Here.
Trustee Pierce-Slovan?
Here.
Trustee Klein?
Here.
Mayor Van Duzen?
Here, we have a quorum. I have a brief opening statement before we get to the agenda specifically. This special meeting is the first of two board meetings on the subject of the future of sustainability in the village of Skokie. This meeting is strictly intended for the sole purpose of having the Sustainability Commission report to the village board on its much anticipated findings and recommendations. Taken together, these recommendations will be the village's guide for the next 8 years, hopefully leading us to a stronger, more sustainable future. I want to specifically acknowledge and thank the village's Sustainability Commission that researched plans across the country and was instrumental in bringing a consultant forward to develop a detailed and professional plan. Also, there was a 30-plus member group called the Environmental Sustainability Plan Team that developed this plan. The team was made up of sustainability commissioners, community members, business representatives, representatives of the village's boards and commissions, intergovernmental representatives, and extensive village staff. On behalf of the board and the residents of the village, I thank you for your impressive work and comprehensive report. You've done a commendable job of studying the challenge of climate change and how Skokie can respond. We also thank the village's staff and our consultant for their many contributions. I would like to just take a moment and introduce the members of the Sustainable Environmental Advisory Commission. After all of the work you've done, I think this is the very least that we can do. As I call your name, I would ask you to please stand so we can recognize you for your efforts. Christopher Bacola. Christopher, thank you. Andrew D. Canary. Andrew? I heard from Andrew. I thought he would be here. Michael Gershbein. Lisa Gotkin. Jenny Grossman, I know, is not going to be with us this evening. Alma Likic. Olivia Mahoney. Olivia, thank you. Jim McNellis. Jim. Rick Moskovich. Emily Akala. Robert Render. There we go. The man knows how to make an entrance. Charlie Sachs. Welcome. Also, I would like to introduce and thank Trustee Cam Kuhn and Trustee Ralph Klein, who are the trustee liaisons. And in just a minute, Max Slankert, who is our Director of Public Works, and Elizabeth Zimmerman, who's the assistant to the director. The draft report was on the village's website for the past month for review. A revised plan incorporating community input was posted on the website last week. The village board will take up the report and deliberate its findings at its next regularly scheduled meeting a week from today, Monday, November 21st, 7:30 p.m. That meeting will be devoted almost exclusively to discussion, Q&A, approving the plan, and voting on the elements of the public policy recommended by the commission. And with that, I would like to introduce Max Slankert, who's the director of our Public Works Department. And Max will act as the master of ceremonies this evening. Max, welcome.
I was just going to add, can we give everybody a hand of applause?
Oh, of
just
course.
to thank them for their work.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. To echo the mayor's comments, we're very pleased to be here this evening to present at long last the village's environmental sustainability plan version 2.0. I'd like to join the mayor in recognizing and commending the long and hard work done by all the members of the environmental sustainability planning team, many of whom I see here in the audience this evening. It was a great honor and privilege to get to know all of you and to work alongside of all of you in crafting this plan. And as those of us who were involved in the process know, tonight's presentation is truly the culmination of many, many hours of work in the process. This plan is an outgrowth and a follow-on to the work that the village commenced in 2007 with the formation of the Sustainable Environmental Advisory Commission. The work of that commission, along with the equally important work of the Board of Health, led to the development in 2015 and the approval in 2016 by both SEAC and the Board of Health of the village's first Skokie Environmental Sustainability Plan. Importantly, that 2016 to 2021 plan held that each of us has an important role to play, and everybody's participation is needed in order for us to achieve our vision of a sustainable community. I think you will find those very same words in our new plan this evening, and it is no less true or less important as we sit here today. In 2021, as we approach the end of this first plan, the village embarked upon undertaking and completing a village-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory. This GHG inventory, conducted by the Delta Institute in Chicago, helped us to understand Skokie's emission characteristics and help set a baseline of common understanding for our future climate and sustainability planning efforts. As the mayor mentioned, having reviewed many examples of sustainability and climate action plans, we made the decision that we wanted to engage professional assistants to work with us and the SEAC to develop our new sustainability plan. And we pursued an RFQ process for professional services to find that right partner. I think we were very fortunate to have found an excellent partner for our work in this endeavor, and I'm very pleased to introduce him now to present the new environmental sustainability plan. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ted Redmond, co-founder of Pale Blue Dot LLC of Maplewood, Minnesota. Ted, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the board. I am very grateful to be here today, and I'm also very grateful, as well as Pale Blue Dot, to be able to work with the village on this plan. It really is gratifying to work with an amazing group that we've been able to work with. So our intent here was just to provide a high-level overview, hopefully not spend too much of your time, but give a good sense of kind of what's in the plan and an overview of it. Starting off a little bit with the process itself. Our process for plan development is pretty intensive related to research. We developed 4 foundational research documents that helped us create sort of Skokie-specific understandings of sustainability considerations. They included the climate vulnerability assessment, the greenhouse gas emission forecast, taking Delta Institute's work and doing a forecast into the future, also a community-wide ground cover, heat island and carbon sequestration study, and a renewable energy potential study. Those 4 foundational documents then were summarized, taking those 300 some odd pages down into a much smaller, slimmer document, into a baseline, sustainability baseline assessment with some preliminary goals that we put forth to work with the planning team on. So all that research went into some initial potential suggestions that began the planning process with the planning team. Just a little highlight in terms of some of our challenges here from a sustainability perspective, looking at it through the lens of climate change. We have already witnessed climate change impacts in the village of Skokie. We can anticipate that if left unabated, by 2050, Skokie and all of Cook County can anticipate a continuing warmer climate, upwards of 20 additional days over 95 degrees. Relating to another 70% in air conditioning demand, an increase of another 15% higher average rainfall, very importantly, another 30% increase in heavy precipitation, and 20-day longer growing season, which sounds great when we think of it in terms of tomatoes, not so great when we think of it in terms of mosquitoes, vectors, and allergens and so forth. We started off the effort with an outreach to the community through a survey as well as listening sessions. Through the survey, we discovered that over 90% of the respondents, of which there were quite a few, in fact, Skokie gets our award for the most number of initial survey responses to population on a per capita basis. Skokie did an amazing job on that. Over 90% of the respondents were moderately, very, or extremely concerned about the potential impacts of climate change. Meanwhile, those same survey takers, over 88%, indicated having had some form of personal impact by climate change impacts already. Again, looking at the community's greenhouse gas emissions, for 2020, the community's emissions totaled over 726,000 metric tons. And you can see sort of the breakdown, energy, transportation, and solid waste making up the larger portions of that, a little bit related to water and wastewater. The opportunity that we have before us, the plan's overarching goal is to reduce the community-wide greenhouse gas emissions by 35% over 2020 levels by 2030 and to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And I'll just make a note that that goal, although the numbers are different from what you may see in the Mayor's Caucus Climate Action Plan, the goal is actually aiming towards the exact same location, if not, in fact, a little bit stronger than what's in the Mayor's Caucus Climate Action Plan. We're using different baseline years simply because Skokie does not have a baseline data for 2005, which is what the caucus uses. We also highlight other communities in the region that have done climate action plans and sustainability plans, just to give you a sense that the goal that we have is not far-fetched or out in left field. There are numbers of other communities doing similar actions aiming towards similar goals. This just illustrates through a successful implementation of the plan and the strategies where we would anticipate Skokie's emissions being between now and 2030, arriving at about 469,000 metric tons by 2030, or a 35% reduction over 2020 levels. The process, the planning process was a little over 8 months. We had over 900 community members providing input and feedback. And has been mentioned, a planning team of 33 team members. And I cannot underscore enough how much of a collaborative effort this was. Those 33 team members showed up to multiple long meetings and had homework between, and they all put in a ton of energy. This plan is truly a collaborative creation, and their service to the community is really significant. The plan itself has 9 sectors, technical sectors, addressing pretty much all aspects of village life. Those 9 sectors focus on achieving the overarching goal through 43 strategic goals or strategies. And those 43 strategies are then supported by some 190 detailed actions. The implementation has been noted is expected to be through an 8-year time frame through 2030. Just a word on what we mean by strategies and actions. Strategies then are goal statements where we ultimately want to find ourselves. So it provides distinct direction. An example would be decreasing community-wide vehicle miles traveled by 5% by 2030. Those sorts of detailed vision statements are backed up then with a number of detailed actions that are anticipated to be implemented through a series of annual implementation plans. As was noted, the draft plan was available for public review. There was a listening session as well as an online listening session, and the plan was available for survey feedback. Of the individuals that made the survey responses, over 87% of the reviewers were in agreement with the plan, either agreeing mostly somewhat or completely agreeing. And now a little bit related to the detailed sections. I just want to give you a highlight of each of the technical sections. So the first technical section is transportation and mobility. There are 7 strategic goals or strategies in that sector. They are focusing on things like reducing our vehicle miles traveled, increasing public transit utilization, increasing electrification of vehicles, exploring development or advancing of alternative fuels, and similar goals for village fleet. Reduction of village fleet GHG emissions. You can see at the bottom, each of the plan sectors have sector goals. Those sector goals you can kind of think of as our dashboard, how we may want to view implementation through the coming years. As we see those numbers move from today's numbers to the targets into the future, we'll know that we're on track. So the sector goals for transportation mobility relate to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions, reducing vehicle miles traveled, increasing commuter public transit utilization, and increasing electrification of transportation. The next sector is housing and land use. There are 3 strategic goals in that sector. The first is to increase average population per developed acre by 10% by 2030. The second is to reduce the share of population living in high energy poverty from almost 15.5% to 10% by 2030. And the last is to update community plans and standards in order to increase the resilience of the community's housing and building stock to the impacts of climate change. The next sector is buildings and energy. That sector has 9 strategies. It includes focuses such as increasing energy efficiency community-wide, increasing the adoption of high-performance building construction, achieving a 5% fuel switch from on-site fuel combustion, so thinking natural gas or fuel oil for heating, switching that to electric or other zero-emission sources, increasing on-site renewable energy community-wide, and increasing green electricity purchasing, which is sort of a tag team for those of us that may not be able to do on-site renewable energy. We can purchase it. And also increasing the resilience of community building stock to the impacts of climate change. And then similar goals for the Village of Skokie's facilities, including increasing village facility energy efficiency, fuel switching, and renewable energy utilization. In the waste management sector, there are 5 strategic goals. It includes decreasing landfill waste by 10% by 2030, increasing the number of commercial properties and condos that recycle and use organics, increasing the diversion rate of organics for single-family households, up to 4 flats, increasing the landfill diversion of recyclable materials by 10%, and increasing the diversion of potential recoverables. So think construction materials, things that can literally be used, not necessarily recycled, but literally reused. The water and wastewater sector is next. There are 3 strategic focuses on that sector, including promoting increased water conservation, reducing our consumption by up to 7.5% community-wide, updating design standards and plans to meet projected climate change impacts of stormwater and flood mitigation requirements, and educating, engaging, and empowering the public on water quality and conservation. The next sector is local food and agriculture. There are 3 strategic goals, including increasing availability and resilience of locally produced food, increasing access to locally produced food, particularly that which serves food insecure individuals, and reducing food waste and hunger, achieving a 50% reduction in food insecurity community-wide by 2030. Next sector is green space and trees. There are 5 strategic focuses in this sector, including increasing tree canopy cover from 25.5% to 28% by 2030 and to 31% by 2040. Next is replacing 8% of turf community-wide with alternative ground cover, so taking manicured lawns, converting it to prairie grass, wildflower sorts of use. The third is reducing heat island effect through a focus on reducing dark impervious surfaces, so you can think green roof strategies, cool roof or cool pavement strategies. The next is increasing climate flooding and extreme heat resilience and biodiversity of our green spaces. And the last is increasing connectivity, accessibility, and equity of the community's parks and open spaces. The next sector is health and safety. There are 4 strategic focuses in this sector, including assisting the community's vulnerable populations in preparing for and mitigating climate change impacts. The second is educating, encouraging, and empowering the public on health and safety risks of climate change impacts. The third is ensuring that the village's mission-critical and emergency services, including healthcare facilities, are prepared for impacts of climate change. And last, strengthening community response capacity and social support networks in order to help build resilience to climate change impacts. The last technical section is economy. There are 4 strategic goals related to the economy. First is developing the economic potential related to sustainability and climate action, In other words, some of these changes may provide opportunities for job or business creation. Why not try to capture that? The next is improving access to training related to sustainable economy to help improve equitable workforce. The third is to develop and implement an education plan to support more climate impact resilience in businesses. And the last is to promote sustainable businesses who are Green America or B Corp certified. Now, at the end of the technical sections, we have an implementation section. That implementation section has what we call cross-cutting strategies and actions. That means that it relates to more than one sector. In fact, many of them relate to all of them, relating to how we might go about implementing the plan. So there are 3 cross-cutting strategic goals. The first is to continue to build internal capacity and support for the environmental sustainability plan implementation. So how do we make sure we build up our internal village capacities? The second is facilitating external support. Because as Max noted, this plan, any plan that is broad, community-based sustainability or climate action really is, implementation is for everybody, is what we say. So the idea of how do we help facilitate building that support and interrelation with other entities, public members, and businesses, and establishing sustainable financing and maintaining appropriate funding as appropriate to support the village's sustainability plan implementation. And I will just pause to say, as an aside, I was asked to attend a meeting with village staff today, and I am extremely impressed. It is the first time I have ever sat in on a kickoff meeting for implementation while the plan was still coming to a close. And I think that's very commendable and really impressive that the village is clearly taking implementation that seriously. So I just want to commend the village for such strong leadership. So in the plan itself, we summarize some of the impacts. This diagram on the far left illustrates what we call a wedge diagram. The wedge diagram models out taking our emissions forecast and models in the strategic goals that I've just gone through at a high level, and models what those impacts of those strategies and actions will be on our emissions, assuming a successful implementation. So each of those wedges show the amount of reduction annually from our greenhouse gas emissions from those strategies and actions. You can see that it's going from the 726 in 2020 down to the 469 in 2030, and the sort of share between the different sectors. Now, I will like to point out that you will see that, of course, buildings and energy and transportation take up the lion's share of the reductions. They are also the lion's share of our current emissions. I encourage folks to not think that that means that waste management and or water strategies are unimportant. Clearly, from an emissions perspective, we've got lots of space to make up related to buildings and transportation, but that isn't to say that other sectors are not critical and important. So I just like to point that out. We've also done a good faith effort of anticipating cumulative savings related to this plan community-wide for those areas that we can anticipate. So, for instance, if we anticipate reducing energy consumption by 10%, well, we have a good sense of what we spend on energy. We know what 10% savings looks like there. We also have some good rule of thumb studies that can help us anticipate how much money likely are we to put in to upgrade buildings in order to achieve that sort of level. So you'll see that we've got good faith efforts at sector cost increases for transportation, for buildings and energy. And we also have a sector cost savings for transportations, buildings and energy, and waste reduction that help us come up with an estimated cumulative potential savings through this plan. The main point here is that, yes, doing sustainability action at this level does take some investment. It also, we can anticipate that it will provide returns. Certainly returns in terms of creating a more resilient community, but also returns in terms of economic potential, and also helping to contribute to avoided costs of carbon. I didn't belabor the climate change impacts, but we do know that without mitigating our future, we can anticipate significant impacts for all of us. And so it is reasonable to illustrate that we can save some of that by taking action. Beyond the plan that I've just overviewed in the PDF file that you have, there are a few implementation tools I'll just touch on so you're aware of them. The first is an implementation matrix. It takes all of that information, puts it into a spreadsheet document that's editable, searchable, collapsible, and can be used for by the implementation team to sort of organize their efforts and track progress. The second is we have assembled a website for use by village implementation team of example climate action and sustainability policies, ordinances, and other programs that other communities have that relate to the plan. The intent here is just to give a boost to the village as certain policies or actions are researched. If we know of resources, we're trying to give them to you. And then lastly, we've done a potential funding approaches memo. That's in the appendix of the report, Appendix A, and just outlines a number of different approaches to funding sustainability and climate action, including an overview of grant potential at the federal and state level, of which right now we are entering into a very significant period of funding through the IIJA, the Infrastructure Act, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act. Literally a couple $1 trillion that is expected to be mobilized, some of which will be directly related to sustainability action, some of which will be will be tangent but accessible to sustainability goals. So with that, I'm happy to take questions or now or later as appropriate.
And you will be at the meeting next Monday.
Yes.
Right. Right. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Outline just a little bit of work. I'm sure we can have it done a week from today.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's very, very informative. Yes.
What about the use of using solar panels on public buildings?
Yeah, so the question, what about the use of solar panels on public buildings? And that is definitely in the plan. Under the buildings and energy sector, there is a goal related to community-wide, advancing renewable energy community-wide, as well as advancing renewable energy for village operations. I'll let him take the questions.
Yes.
Does this include park district and library and other, or just the village's entity? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Park district is separate, library is separate.
Yeah, it includes all of the above from the perspective of the sustainability plan has community-wide goals, as well as goals and community-wide goals and actions, I should say, as well as community-wide goals and actions, or excuse me, village operations goals and actions. So where we're talking about community-wide energy efficiency and so forth, it would be hoped to encourage the park district to also participate and achieve those goals.
And I believe the library and the park district both had representatives on the planning team.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, in terms of funding, you've talked about grants. You have a breakdown on percentage of anticipated funding in terms of grants, donations from the private sector, tax increases. Do you have any percentage of where the funding is coming from?
No, we did not do map out a specific funding scenario. That we think an appropriate approach might be to assess all village sort of funding sources and then determine what makes the most sense related to the current village funding, mechanisms and what the gap might be. The memo that we put together was identifying a range of strategies that could include taking existing funding streams and modifying how they're structured, so that it helps encourage certain behaviors or outcomes that relate to the plan, as well as different potential new funding mechanisms, be it a tax or fee, as well as then the grant potentials. So. But we did not map out a specific scenario to achieve a funding gap.
A couple more, and then we have to move on. Yes, ma'am.
Will the management of this process be done by committee, or is there a designated person?
The village manager.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's not so much a question as just a suggestion. When I was a kid, we had this Niles Free Bus that would go all over Niles and take kids, various people to different areas around the community. What about the idea of having like an electric bus like that, getting cars off the road, driving to like the library, train stations, the village hall, the mall, to get people not driving their cars, but also getting access to different places around the village? But it would have to be electric.
Yeah, that's a lovely suggestion, and it does, I think, fit there are a couple actions in there in which that could be a good exploration to fit those.
I'm sure there's some drawbacks to it. I was just saying.
Yeah, I think it's a lovely.
Okay, just a couple more. Yes.
What thoughts are there so far on what the timeframes and mechanisms might look like for the planning process, the tracking process, the reporting process, kind of around the progress of the plan over the course of its duration?
I'm not sure. I can indicate the suggestions that are in the plan, or perhaps the village manager may have some response.
Testing 1 2. Testing. My light doesn't work, and so I apologize for that. So we had the kickoff of the implementation team today, and we set the expectation that there's leadership for each sector. And so there's a primary and a secondary for each sector that was mentioned tonight. The expectation also is for each of those sector leaders to have a work plan for calendar year 2023, and that there will be regular reporting of those sectors. And so we're well on our way and plan to update the board on a regular basis as we make progress.
And I can say that's a perfect fit with the recommendation that was in the plan. That was the same recommendation there. So.
Yeah, and I might point out, this is similar to what we did, I think it may have been 8 years ago, with the police department. We had a consultant come in, do a review, give us recommendations, and then John and, at that time it was Police Chief Scarpelli, reported to the village board every 6 months. With the different metrics of what was going on. So I would assume we would do something of a similar fashion. Yes.
What about apartment buildings that don't provide the residents a way to recycle?
That's something we will be taking up. Yep, that would be part of the whole waste management.
You would make them do it?
Well, we will try and find ways to incentivize them. I think that's the phrase. No. Yes.
Is there any plan for community-wide composting opposed to individual houses?
Yeah, things like compost collection sites, drop-off sites, those sorts of things. Yeah, as I cannot memorize all of the actions directly, but I do believe that there was a specific action around exploring that, as well as how can we encourage, on-site collection, those sorts of strategies. So both.
Two more, and then we have to, yes.
You mentioned that there was going to potentially be an implementation website. Will that only be for the people who, within this village itself? Or will that be something that the community-wide, especially like business and things like that, will have access to for guidelines and input?
Yeah, it's not, I just want to clarify, it's not an implementation website per se. It's a database that's on a web page for example policies, ordinances, and programs that support various actions in the plan. So not every action has one, because if we don't have it in the database, we can't give it to you. But that is available, publicly available, and it's linked in the plan, and it's linked in the implementation matrix. So.
final question. Yes?
Is there a potential strategy for homeowners switching to other kinds of renewable energy like solar panels?
Yes, there are two strategic goals with actions related to it, related to residents and commercial properties on renewable energy. One set focused on on-site renewable energy, so the idea of how can we promote, advance on-site renewable energy to put solar panels or what have you on my home, as well as purchased renewable energy, which may recognize some properties may not be a good fit for on-site solar for all sorts of reasons. So trying to advance both.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ted. I would next like to introduce the Vice Chairperson of this Sustainable Environmental Advisory Commission, Mr. Jim McNillis.
Thank you, Max. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, trustees. I'm very excited to be here tonight. Very excited to put the sustainability plan in front of you for your consideration. And thank you for your invite. I also want to acknowledge my fellow commission members, and thank you for being here. I don't have any slides. I'm just going to talk off some paper. What I'm really here to do is queue up for Max and Liz. They're going to talk in more detail about a couple specific proposals. So besides the sustainability plan that's been put in front of you, the commission also has a couple very specific proposals to also put in front of you. So I want to talk at a high level about those. And again, Max and Liz will go into more detail about it. But what I want to talk about is how did we come to these proposals? Where did they come from? What were the guiding principles behind them? And then go into a little bit about what they're based on. So where did the proposals come from? Back about a year ago, a little over a year ago, the Environmental Commission was given a task to look into proposals, ideas for reducing the village's waste stream. So what we did, this is actually before we started the sustainability planning, the sustainable plan itself. So we formed a waste subcommittee, and we had some listening sessions with community members. We also solicited input via email, letters, and we got input from residents, business members, groups like Go Green Skokie, and we collected all the information. Again, this was focused on ideas for reducing the waste stream. And the common themes that came from all that input was number one, a village-wide composting program, and number two, reducing the village refuse pickup from twice a week to once a week. Those were the main themes. Also, a third theme, common theme, was communication and education for everybody in Skokie around these proposals. So I want to talk about those. What were the guiding principles behind these proposals? Well, for composting, we wanted to, A, serve the widest array of residents as possible, not just single family, but multi-unit housing and businesses. We wanted to make this available to as many people as possible. Again, the composting, make it as convenient and affordable as possible. We wanted to look at data. We wanted to look at other villages, look at other programs, look at what else is going on. What are other villages doing? How successful is it? What can we learn from them? What should we do? What should we not do? We want a program that's successful from the get-go, from the start. We don't want to, fail from the outset and then have everybody say, see, we told you it wasn't going to work. We want to plan for success. We want to do something that's going to fit our budget and then something that we can build over time. And so also, we wanted something that can be implemented right away. So those are the founding principles for the composting. As far as reducing the refuse pickup, some guiding principles were, we understand and we recognize that that mindset of the excellent village services. We understand that. In fact, my wife and I, we bought our house here in 1995 in Skokie, and at the time we did it for the strong schools and the strong village services. And so I understand that mindset. And back then, nobody ever really talked about GHG emissions and climate change. And now, you know, times have changed. We have the village signed off on the Paris Climate Accords. We are part of the Mayor's Caucus on the Climate Action Plan. So, you know, so we have to take thoughtful looks at what we're doing and how we're doing it. And that also has to be data driven. We wanted to look at the refuse pickup and look at, can we do something here? Does it make sense? It has to make sense, and it has to be, you know, make sense from a budget standpoint and an operation standpoint. So we looked at data. Liz is going to go more into that. So touching a little bit on what the proposals are based on, for the composting, our waste subcommittee looked at, I'll call them 3 main options: small, medium, big. And from the outset, we wanted to go big. And so we looked at that with Max and Liz. But to be honest, the budget numbers that Max and Liz initially gathered for a big proposal, they were kind of scary from a budgeting standpoint. So, you know, and the other programs that we looked at other villages, we wanted to learn from that. And we looked at other villages who also went big. And we looked at their participation rates. So again, we want something successful from the outset. We don't want to fail right off the bat. So in the end, what we're recommending and putting forward in this proposal is, at least to begin with, it's a hybrid approach. So the two main proposal ideas there is proposing compost drop-off locations throughout the village. And then we're also thinking expanding a village subsidized curbside program a la the collective resources type of program that currently serving the village. We think this combo hybrid solution is going to serve the broadest array of customers as possible. It can get started up rather quickly, and it won't blow out the budget. So that's not to say that the village shouldn't also, we're open to considering that big option too. If that can, again, the initial numbers we looked at were pretty scary, but if that can be, you know, renegotiated with a service provider and, you know, that option be brought down in budget, hey, great, we're all about that. But again, from the numbers we had and the numbers we looked at, we wanted something that we can put forward right away because we have to take action. We have to start doing something. So we want to put something that makes sense. As far as a reduced refuse pickup, what is that based on? Again, Liz is going to go into more detail, but based on the data that was collected by village staff over the past probably year and a half now, that showed that over 80% of the households in Skokie don't need the second pickup. Skokie is in fact an outlier. Pretty much all the other villages that we looked at have once a week trash pickup. Now, Skokie does not generate twice as much garbage as everybody else. And no, we don't have to be like everybody else, but in this aspect, we're not a leader. And we are behind the curve. So we have to put everything on the table and we have to look at this. So, and we appreciate your consideration of this. And as Liz presents her data after I do, I would ask the trustees to look at it like this. If we currently had once a week pickup, look at her data and think, does that data make me think I want or that we need to have twice a week pickup? I would propose to you that it's absolutely no. The other two components of our proposals, the third one being the communication and education. Where did this come from or what's it based on? So with the new sustainability plan that we just kind of went through and putting these other proposals into action, the commission recognizes that a big part of our success is going to be getting residents and businesses on board. We need to put a strategic communication and education plan into place. So one quick example from Liz's refuse data collection, the staff saw many examples of trash being put into recycling containers and vice versa. They saw examples of recyclables going into trash. So not to mention with a new composting program, people need to know what they can and can't put into the different containers, including composting bin. So if we're going to be successful in driving down the overall volume of Skokie's waste stream, we think it's imperative to educate and communicate with people. The last proposal, what we have in front of you, is a new staff position related to sustainability. The commission is sensitive to budget and headcount concerns. We are. But we also think that in order to successfully and competently implement all the initiatives being proposed here, including everything that's in the sustainability plan, we're going to need someone who's focused on that. Someone to champion this mission and to be held accountable for implementing the programs. While you can just add more hats to the current people in the village staff to wear, we think that's a recipe for failure by committee. We're also sensitive to the fact that Max and Liz have their main day jobs of running the Public Works Department. We actually think that with all the grants that are out there and available for the environmentally related programs, we think this new position could actually pay for itself. So that's all I have. Again, thank you for your consideration of the sustainability plan and for our proposals, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Will you be able to attend the meeting next Monday? Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jim. I'd like to introduce the next very brief speaker, which would be me. I'm here. All right, so I just wanted to give a little context for Jim's comments about some of the costing options, and this will be very brief. So for context, when we talk about the drop-off program options, this would be potentially establishing drop-off locations, and this is all very conceptual, but the point is, we've talked to, two different service providers for this cost model, and the cost model, I think, is very straightforward. So you're looking at a range of costs of something like 19, depending on container size, $19 to $26 per service of toter. And so that just gives you a sense of scale. Drop-off locations, we've heard various providers, both providers that we spoke to have talked about seeing these facilities in the Twin Cities area and seeing them very well done, as well as seeing locations, their drop-off locations in Winnetka, Glencoe, they're piloting in Oak Park. So it seems to be an interesting way to go about providing the service and provide some good opportunities to serve a couple different purposes.
Max,
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt, but could you just define for us what type of items we're talking about for people to drop off, just so everybody's on the same page?
Yeah, it'd be food scrap. Compost is what the intention is. It's not intended to be yard waste. This is organics collection, food scrap. So, what is it, Liz? If it was alive? If it grows, it goes. If it was alive, right? So yeah. Then the two larger program options we talked about, just to give the board a sense of what these program types are that would be truly curbside. So as the board knows, we currently have a franchise agreement in place with Collective Resource, where they're the preferred provider, if you will, or the franchise provider in Skokie for what most people think of as the orange bucket 5-gallon pail service at your home, but in point of fact, her service size goes up to 32-gallon toter size. And so that service is provided really not only to just residential, it can also provide service to commercial size customers, and so it's scalable in that sense. We have had conversations with the owner of that business about the ability to scale that service up, and that was part and parcel of Jim's presentation a few minutes ago. But we've also had conversations with LRS, who is our incumbent service provider on a number of fronts, about programs they offer in other communities. So just for point of reference, we had a service indicative pricing offered again, so this is not, we did not go out and bid this. And so as the board knows, but to explain to members of the public who are here and those that might be listening on the other forms of communication, when we get bid pricing, we expect pricing to be better or more real than when we're just discussing and getting indicative costs. But for an opt-in program, and so this is a price that a provider gives to us, and under this model, they say, we're going to charge you on a per household, per month basis. Whether 10 people raise their hand and say, yes, bring a toter to my house and provide me service, or up to as many as 30% of your residents say they want it. Here is the price. And in this case, it's $3.25 per month, which equates to $631,000 a year minimum cost for that program to be offered in Skokie. If participation goes above 30%, it goes up to $874,000 a year. And if it exceeds 40%, it goes to $972,000 a year. If it exceeds 50%, they want to negotiate a new price. So that's for an opt-in program. For an all-in program, which is similar to what Village of Deerfield has recently embarked on with LRS as a service provider, the cost of that, $6.50 a month. In that program, every home that's covered under the contract in Skokie would receive a toter. You wouldn't have to call the service provider or call the village and say, I want a toter. You would get one. And at least in the case of Deerfield, some people would say, I don't want this toter. Why'd you give me this toter? Well, you have one. You figure out what to do with it. The cost for that, $6.50 a month. So scaled up to Skokie's size, cost of that program, $1.26 million. So those, again, are indicative prices for that sort of program. So those are some of the numbers that Jim is referring to that we have talked about when we're analyzing these options. So our recycling contract with Lakeshore ends at the end of May 2023. So we either need to renegotiate or rebid that services agreement for those services towards the end of this month if we're going to go to bid. And so our intention as we sit here today would be to rebid those services. And so our intention, we believe, going forward would be include alternates in that bid for a variety of different things that we want to get pricing for. But be mindful of the fact of the recommendation that Jim has just articulated to you. We want to do that just so we can explore some different program options and take advantage of the opportunity to get numbers on those. But that's our intention at this moment. Questions? Yes, sir.
When food scrap goes into the landfill, does it break down there? Does it compost there in where the wet garbage goes?
Who's my best life sciences person? Liz? I know I see you over there, but Liz or Ted? Choose between yourselves.
I'll dive on that one. So that's a great question. When it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, organics that go into a landfill, eventually they do break down, they create methane. And so when we look at greenhouse gas emissions associated with waste management, the lion's share of what we are accounting for is organics that are breaking down, creating methane. So in terms of organics collection programs like this, the opportunity is to take that organics and to use it in a way that does not create the same kind of methane, but instead creates soil building. You know, we're building soil.
So by composting,
yes.
we're going to be we're not going to be producing as much methane?
Yeah, it's along the lines of, think of like aerobic versus anaerobic, like when you're exercising. If you get into anaerobic, you're building up acids in your body. When it comes to organics in landfill, basically what's happening is it's creating methane as it's breaking down without the benefit of oxygen. But when we can put it into a composting system, what ends up happening is that organics break down into reusable components. It's soil. I mean, that's what happens on farms and forests. Leaves fall to the ground and they turn into soil. There is a little bit of emission associated with that, but it's microscopic in comparison to capturing it in a landfill where it generates methane. So out of all of the things that we can do related to reducing our emissions, taking organics out of our landfills and putting them into composting sorts of programs where we're building soil product instead of methane is probably the number one thing you can do. So,
Thank you for explaining that.
You
I
bet.
did not know. Thank you.
Mayor?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. My question is regarding what you were saying about renegotiating and looking at other bids for recycling, and you said that there are other options. I don't know what that means. I mean, I understand recycling, but what other things can we be doing that would be related to recycling that you're looking at?
Well, if we were gonna ask, the marketplace to give us, numbers for, some of these sorts of organics options, we might also include having them give us a number for collecting yard waste along with a food scrap organic, so we know what that price would be. We've also talked about the notion of, should we ask them, since they're bidding on, we would probably put that contract out as like a 5-year minimum time period, since they're bidding on that time period of work that has a certain commercial value. We might ask them to put in a number for some type of electronics recycling, because we're going to the marketplace, they're trying to get or renew our business. Why not ask them for it? So there's a couple different alternates that we may think about putting in the bid just to solicit pricing and see what somebody will do for us.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can you clarify, so with the curbside pickup, for Lakeshore Recycling, if they're doing the scrap pickup, are they actually composting, or are they just picking it up and putting it somewhere?
They're composting.
They are composting?
Yes.
Okay.
Max, you said that Winnetka, Glencoe, and I think you said Oak Park have drop-offs. Have you talked to them to see how their programs have worked? Have they been successful? Have the percentage of people that participate? Did they do it as a first step? Those kind of questions.
We have not had detailed conversations with their staff. Oak Park's piloting, as I recall, is fairly new. I believe John may have had a conversation with Phil Crowley in Glencoe about theirs, and Winnetka's, my recollection is intended to be focused on their commercial community, actually, as an opportunity for them. But yeah, I have not had direct conversations with them.
I think the only municipality in our general area that has done extensive residential is Deerfield. They do curbside food scrap, and they only have 30% participation of their residents. And they do it through Lakeshore.
In conjunction with their grass clippings.
Beg your pardon?
Deerfield does their grass clippings and their
Some
food
of it, yeah.
recycles together.
That's right. Yeah.
Question. So it sounds like this is a relatively new business for those business people out there. How many companies, in your recollection or in your research, are available to you that even offers this ability to compost?
Lakeshore is doing most of the business in our service area that's doing large scale. So within this area, they are sort of the player right now. This used to be Groot's service area. Lakeshore sort of displaced Groot. There are some other programs that, as was mentioned, I think by Trustee Klein, mixing food scrap in with other organics, yard waste, has been around a little bit longer. I'm not recalling offhand who is providing that service in Evanston, but Evanston has had a yard waste cart program where you could put food scrap into the cart. I'm not sure the tenure on that program. So there are a few others around. I'd be happy to provide that information to the board. We have a listing of other communities with the other forms of program that they're running. Thanks.
Yeah, one of the, I mean, Monday we're going to take up all this, but just very briefly, one of the downsides to having your organic food in with the clippings is it increases your rodent problem. Because what is it rodents look for? They look for food. So if you put it in your bag with your clippings and so on, you're inviting the rodents. So that at least as it was explained to me is one of the downsides. Whereas doing it in a tote changes the dynamic a little bit.
You guys use your microphones, so it's kind of hard to get very hard.
Oh, sorry. Beg your pardon.
If we were to pursue a contract with Collective Resources, do they have a minimum year commitment to begin with for their composting program for the village?
We have an existing agreement with them that runs through 2024.
And would that be expanding on that existing agreement then, or would there be an amendment required?
You know, I don't recall if there are any extensions in that agreement, so I can't answer offhand whether we would need a form of extension or not.
So when we're talking about the hybrid approach, it's expanding the current program with Collective Resources and also providing a drop-off location for composting then, right?
Correct,
So it's the existing program that we have today expanded.
yes.
I can't find it exactly in the plan, but I know there's a section that talked about the possibility of providing free or discounted compost bins to residences. Is that, to what extent did SEAC explore this, or was this part of the kind of?
Just as a reminder that as Max is working to get somebody's attention, the village does have the compost bin rebate program
Right.
currently in place, and so we offer to residents that are interested, if they'd like to have a compost bin on their property, that they purchase that, and then the village has a $25 rebate program, and those compost bins are approximately $70 to $80 currently.
Thank you.
Did you just answer that while I was consulting backstage?
I did.
Way to go.
I did.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I will turn it over next to Liz Zimmerman to review the results of the refuse toter usage and capacity recycling study and communications update.
Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Okay, I think one of the questions we had as staff as we start to hear some of the proposals from SEAC are, how can we handle this operationally? And what is going on in our system? And so that was my task. And we started about a year ago. We wanted to know what the toter capacity was for a given household, and if we could go to a once-a-week collection, essentially. And the methodology for doing that, what we did is we drew lines around our routes, and we exported that data into an Excel spreadsheet. We went online, we took an online lottery system, so everything was randomized. And then we sent interns and seasonals out into the field to check toter capacity. And I live in town, so for example, they would have checked my toter on a Monday and a Thursday and then added those two numbers together to get the toter capacity for the week. And so we spent some time calibrating our eyes to make sure that we were kind of all on the same page. And so 0% if they went out there was an empty toter, or there might have been a few Jewel grocery bags at the bottom of the cart, but very little trash. 25%, 50%, 75%, 100% full. If the toter was overflowing, we marked that as 125%. And sometimes we would get out there, and not very often, but there were a few houses that had maybe 2 toters on the property, or there would be a bulk item next to the toter. So that was 150% or more. And this is the data that we got, and we did this data twice. We sort of started last winter, and we didn't collect as much data as we would have liked. And so we got smarter on how we collected the data. We got a little faster, and so that second study, we had a bigger sample size. So what we're looking at here, and I love it when data surprises me. I always like to dig into data that doesn't seem quite right. We're seeing a high percentage of 0% toters. That really surprised me when we saw that in the winter. And so I started doing interviews with some of our refuse crews and so forth, and they said, we have a lot of people that are snowbirds that actually leave for the winter. And so we saw that was definitely a factor larger than what we had anticipated. And we have a lot of households that generate just a really little bit of trash. They're just a couple of like those small Jewel bags on the bottom of that toter for a collection. So when we went to that summer collection, we saw, hey, snowbirds came back, and that 0% did go down as we saw it. I aspire to be a snowbird someday. So, so what we see here is approximately 82 to 86% of our residents would be totally fine if we switched to once a week without even changing their actions at all. But as we get to the yellow and the orange, the red, we do have, still out there, we're going to have a few thousand residents that are going to have, a bit of a hard time making the transition. We hope to accommodate that with some boots on the ground education. I'm going to get more into that on the communications aspect. And so we think that we can reduce some of these households in the red with some education on recycling and composting and our special collections. But we also anticipate that there's going to be some residents out there that are going to have what I call toter anxiety. They're going to, they are fine out there. They're going to have enough toter capacity, but they're still going to be calling Public Works thinking that they, need a second toter. So we're going to have to handle those on a case-by-case basis with our staff. We did do a small waste audit. Like Jim had mentioned, we really wanted to see what are some opportunities out there in the garbage that, we could, for education purposes and for increased recycling and so forth. This is the more glamorous part of my job. So we got to pull actual trash and bring it into Public Works, dig through the trash and see what we're finding. And so, like 70% of residents are doing a pretty good job at recycling, but could use a little bit of education. But there's another 30% of residents where we have a real opportunity to increase their recycling or their textile recycling or, various special pickups. And then we just wanted to show a photo there. This was a very typical photo of what we were finding. As we dug through the trash, there would always be a little small section of recycling that didn't make it into the trash. So, and for what reasons, we don't know. We think the education is pretty clear, for example, that a soda can is recycling, but maybe there's a teenager in the house and, they threw it out in a basement can or whatever. That just, we just have to work on that and, develop not only what needs to be recycled, but also the why. Just wanted to provide a little context of what our overall waste stream looks like. So the vast majority of our waste stream is refuse. After that, we do have single stream recycling and then yard waste, and all those other programs are a relatively small percentage. Communications update. Per the direction of SEAC, we really, I think, tried to vamp up this program in the last year. I do want to take a minute and just thank Ann Tennis. She came from Swank. She's highly knowledgeable. She's really been doing a lot of this education for years, and she's been doing a great job at it. We recently added Meredith, who's in the back. And I will say, we've been, previous to Meredith, I would try to, put things out on social media, and the quality of what's going out on social media was pretty recognizable from about the day that she started. But we still have our different ways to educate. We've got Skokie News that goes out weekly. I think we have 40,000 or something subscribers to that. And we've got good click metrics. We get good responses from the e-news. We've got our social media is really in high gear now. And then I do want to just mention, we did this cart tagging program this year with a solid waste intern, and we were able to get 5,000 cart tags out there. So I don't know if anybody in the room received one of our cart tags this year. Really positive feedback on the program. It's personalized feedback, so the intern was flipping the lid and seeing actually, what were the things that weren't meant to be there, writing notes on that, and et cetera. We plan to continue this. We have Go Green volunteers that are really excited to help us free of cost to continue this program, so we're really excited about that. And the cart tag education has just worked out really well for us, and so we're looking at that model to move forward with some other aspects of the program. We also try to go to more events this year. We just smashed our pumpkin recycling record from last year. We did over a ton more than last year, 4.5 tons. We had a presence at National Night Out this year, and for the first time ever, the Rotary Pancake Breakfast was also composting. So the next steps we have, we want to really look at how to keep our costs down. We have a lot of volunteers interested in helping us. I get emails all the time, so we want to look at that aspect of it. Another exciting program that Go Green had come up with this year is they wanted to attend block parties and kind of get the word on composting out for that. And so our partner Collective Resource, we called, and right away she donated a toter for that. And so we did a few block parties this year. And recently heard just actually last week that the water bill has been a great opportunity for some other municipalities to get the word out. So we want to explore that a little bit. And there's other communication items in our sustainability plan that we're looking forward to tackling. So if anybody has any question on that? Yes.
I was wondering if there's any opportunity to expand the composting to restaurants and grocery stores.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of the providers are completely capable of handling commercial accounts. Yes.
Do you think they'll be willing to comply?
We have some interest in the business community, so we're hoping, and that's definitely a part of the educational part in the plan. We had the business community sitting in on the plan development, and I think that will help as well.
Trustee Pierce-Sullivan.
Thank you. For those who are concerned about, because we don't want anyone to go into a panic attack about their refuse, for those who really are filling, twice a week, there are larger families, and we have to be mindful of that. Would we offer them for their once-a-week pickup, though, 2 receptacles for their trash?
Yeah, that's the plan. I mean, we're not going to let there be any sort of health scenario out there where there's overflowing trash and the rodents can get at it. That's obviously something that we want to avoid. I think we're going to have a period of time with some growing pains and some transition. We plan on that. We plan on working that out. We're very confident that we can make this happen with our staff, and also just knowing that the towns around us have all been able to transition.
Mayor, can I ask another question with
Of
that?
course.
Thank you. And the second question is, do we find that there's an increase in refuse during holiday time? If we looked at, like, when Thanksgiving, Christmas, when people are generally together, and how are we going to address that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was doing the study, it was interesting. I was trying to pull weeks of what's a normal week. And as we go through the calendar year, there's really no normal week. There's back to school. There's Skokie's so diverse that we have just a plethora of wonderful holidays here. So there's so many, weeks within the calendar that have something special. But with that said, we have really great data since 1995 that shows very clear trends on which months are heavy and which months are light. And so that was also very calming to us as a staff and preparing for this, of we kind of know what to expect out there.
Trustee Klein.
Yeah, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but in neighboring municipalities, they have the once a week, and they offer a second tote. Do they charge for it? And do they charge more for a pickup?
Yes, so I was the one that completed the survey when we were studying the refuse fee. I can't think of a community that does not charge for the extra tote, but I could be wrong. There might be one out there. And there is a cost to that. The toter itself is $55. When you think of, just the labor and the truck cost of delivering those, that certainly is a very popular request for us. And so it's a very common to have a fee with a second toter.
For the toter, but what about for the pickup?
Yes to that as well, but I don't think we're going to be offering a second, or that wasn't proposed to be offering a second pickup. A lot of the communities that started with the second pickup will find after a year or two that they tend to drop it because it's just difficult to manage.
Did you mean a second pickup?
No, I just meant
No, if
that-
you pick up two at the same time,
Thank
is
you.
there an extra charge?
Oh, I think that's all inclusive. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Sorry.
Thanks for interpreting.
Go ahead.
Two thoughts. First of all, I love the picture about, it looked like 25% of the trash typically could be recycled. Is there any, did you look into communicating through schools?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's actually in the plan, is to work with the schools. Skokie's a little more challenging than maybe some of the other communities that Ted works with. We have a lot of school districts in town. But that's, definitely something that we want to pursue, is to at the very least, get maybe an email group together and we push out information or something.
The second point is, there's also a concept out there of totes getting weighed and people are charged how much they throw out. Is that still a norm out there, or?
More common, at least in this area, is pay as you throw based on toter size. And so, Chicago doesn't have that at all, but a lot of the other communities do. So that is something that we can look at. I think we hesitated as staff to make too many changes at one time.
I just wanted to piggyback. I was thinking of the schools as well, but you were talking about volunteering, so I just had the image of programs specifically to get students engaged in a very proactive way and also educate them about climate change at the same time. I think that's something to really consider.
Thank you.
Yep, the Solid Waste Agency does do that. We use volunteers. In fact, part of the recycling study was done by the Solid Waste Agency volunteers. Yeah. Yes.
Two things. One, have you looked at, in Evanston, for instance, they have, I think it's 3 or 4 times a year that they do a large-scale volume, which helps for some of the specialty items you talked about. And the second thing is, have you looked at, a specialized drop-off collection for film and styrofoam, which obviously can't be part of the regular stream, but is getting increasingly difficult to find anywhere locally to recycle, and which obviously is a concern.
Yeah, that's a great question. Styrofoam did make it into the plan, I believe, for us to research. I frankly just haven't done anything on that yet, so I don't know very much information. For the plastic films, I will say we find that people really like that grocery store model. They're going to the grocery store anyway, and they like to bring their plastic films there. I would love to explore a stronger partnership with the places, the businesses where people are going anyway, and they don't have to make a special trip somewhere else. So that would be my my kind of first blush response on that. But we'll definitely be looking at plastic films as well.
You're talking about basically recycling and which would kind of take, recycling more and taking it out of normal trash and putting it in the recycling bin. That would also start increasing the amount of recycling that you have to be picked up. Now, generally for myself, I do recycle a lot, and come Friday, which is our recycling, my recycling bin is overfilled, but my regular bin is not. Are you gonna try compensating now, because the recycling bin is now gonna be the main use, where the standard can is not?
It's like I asked you to come tonight as my plant, I think. So, that's a great question. I was just talking to Max today that when we go out for our next contract, we're going to have to think about that as far as pricing to maybe upgrade the toter's capacity size. Yeah.
I just want to say you're awesome. I've been watching you talk for since February, both of you.
She's my second plant. Okay. Thank you.
Did we have one more?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there any plan for plastic bags, which is one of the big problems of environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that falls into the plastic film category, which it's just kind of a broader category of that, the plastic films and the bags and so forth. I also failed to mention, and Mayor Van Dusen can probably maybe mention a little bit more, but Swank has been telling us that the legislation for the original manufacturers is really kind of gaining some traction, where they're going to be responsible for their packaging. And so we're excited about that. We think that that's also coming down the pipeline and is going to be a big help to us.
Spring session.
Yeah. So we agree, and source reduction is definitely going to be part of the education. Yep. Thank you.
Very quickly, we've got to move on.
Well, I wanted to ask a question. What about, why is composting with plates and stuff so expensive? Like, wouldn't that be an easier solution, is just let the schools stop use circulars and use compost materials? Is that even feasible, or is that just over?
Yeah, that's not really, I would say with the schools, I can't really comment on how their setups are. I do know that a lot of the compostable, plates and silverware and so forth are not really that compostable. So, we really don't love to see them getting into the stream, but a small portion can.
Great, thank you. Our next speaker is Community Development Director Johanna Neiden, who will speak about community development initial implementation opportunities, including existing and future buildings.
Good evening. It's nice to come after talking about waste management, because another high touch point beyond garbage and recycling collection is people wanting to do things to their buildings, whether you're a resident or you're a business here or coming to the Village of Skokie. Another point of entry to people coming to the village is the building permit operation, community development. So our department has gotten very engaged since the draft plan came out. We started talking about how the community development department can help effectuate the change that that this community wants to see. And so prepared a little bit, some quick hits, some high points of ideas and implementation that we'll be working on in the coming months. So top is promote programs and activities to reduce building energy and consumption. I did some quick data gathering before this meeting. To date, this calendar year, the village has issued close to 2,500 building permits. Now, some of those are, somebody's going to do a little kitchen remodel, or maybe they're going to replace replace some flat work in their backyard. Minor things. It's not like do you want solar energy with that? We don't really have that opportunity, but maybe we should think about that opportunity, is taking those points of contact when somebody comes in and providing some education about energy efficiency, small ways and inexpensive ways to upgrade and weatherize their homes to keep energy and heat loss from leaving their buildings, but also other ways that they can reduce carbon footprints and greenhouse gas emissions. So education, opportunities for audits with our various partners, all of those almost 2,500, some of those may be somebody's pulling this one property, multiple permits, but opportunities for engagement with our community, both business and residential. And of those permits, by the way, there's a handful of those are fence permits, and other accessory permits, but close to 900 were residential permits and 600 were non-residential, meaning commercial. So those are all opportunities for us to better engage and communicate the sustainability plan and the village's priorities for change. So long-term planning, I was here a couple weeks ago, talking about the creation of the environment chapter in our comprehensive plan. Our next step, once this plan is adopted, is to think about how this sustainability plan is overlaid into the comprehensive plan, and we make those revisions so we can look at what the next 10 to 15, 20 years of the village's planning looks like. And that's really important for future planning activities, future development. Those are all documents that developers, people who are making investments in their new or existing entities will look to that document to say, here's what the village wants to see. Often when developers come to any community, they say, what does the village want? And depending on who you're talking to, you might get a different answer. But the document should tell the same story to everybody every time. So the document and other guiding documents like this, the one that we're discussing tonight, are really important for the work that we want to do in the next decade and plus. But that also speaks to looking at a new transportation plan, working with our colleagues in Public Works, seeking funding for that plan, looking at how, once we adopt we redo our comprehensive plan a little bit, what that has in terms of implications for our zoning code. And I'll slow down there a little bit, because when you have a comprehensive plan, that informs how you make your zoning changes. So you can't just pick and choose different zoning changes. You want to have a plan that's a guiding document that helps inform those zoning changes. So there's a lot of spots in our proposed plan that talk about things like parking, count determination changes, accessory dwelling units, all of those kinds of things. We need to look at a broader, bigger umbrella plan before we make those changes. And then last, looking at the ongoing operationalization of sustainability in our department operations. Those first impressions, I was just speaking to the staff this afternoon. We sometimes only have one chance to make a good impression on residents or businesses, because they come in to get a building permit, or they have some interface with the community development department. I want to make sure that going forward, the staff that they're speaking with understands a little bit more about sustainability and not just how to process a building permit. They need to understand why this plan is important. They need to understand the different aspects of it, and they need to be relatively well versed in what that means to their job and the work that they're doing and how that all relates. So not just getting good versatility in the plan, but also making sure that our permit techs, our inspectors, our planners are all spending time getting professional development in sustainability. Most of our professional development organizations offer sustainability tracks or sustainability webinars or sustainability in-person events. We need to make that a priority, and that's what we've been doing over the past couple months.
Trustee Sucker.
I have a question about can you hear me okay? Okay. I have a question about economic development and recruiting businesses that are environmentally sustainable into the village. And I'm wondering if you have a plan about that.
So right now we're in the process of developing an RFP to update our economic development strategy. So one piece of that includes sustainable economic development opportunities. But also not just bringing in businesses that will support sustainable and environmental friendly business opportunities and growth in that sector, but also making sure that we're working with businesses so they can be sustainable and environmentally friendly. I was really happy to see that the plan calls out the supporting and development of B corporations. I've worked with some businesses in previous positions to think about how they do the B impact analysis. So their businesses are getting smarter about how they become more sustainable, and then incorporating and building a business model that helps further sustainability goals.
Yes.
You talk about building permits and, home remodels and stuff like this. Is there anything in the ordinance that kind of requires that, when that, remodel is done, say like a kitchen, that it's going to be, more energy efficient? Or is it just going to, say if the inspector comes down and says, well, you remodeled the whole kitchen, you tore the walls out, put new walls in, but you didn't do anything for better insulation. Is there anything that's gonna be addressing that?
Sure. So a couple things. One, the village has adopted the most current ICC code, so we have the most current available option. There's other pieces of the code, the energy code. There's also the green codes that we may look to think about adopting. I think it also comes just with education, is making, I've been on the job almost 3 months. I've gone out with the inspectors on ride-arounds to just kind of get a flavor of what their day-to-day looks like. And while we're not, as a village, going to go and help them workshop their project, I do observe that sort of, if you did this, you'd meet this R value. There's a little bit of helping and technical assistance that can be provided. When we review plans, we're going to give a little bit of that coaching and that assistance, but we can't, outside of what the codes are you provide, we're not going to necessarily require something else. It also is pretty complex for contractors, for architects, to keep track of all the codes. So by adopting the 2021 ICC, it's clear, it's straightforward. Another point that I noted in my memo was getting to, and I think this is a little bit to your concern, is getting to people before they make decisions, about what wall they want to close up or open up, getting that education piece up front, particularly with larger developments. I've found in my career, if you tell somebody, here are the priorities, here's what we'd like to see up front before they've started to spend money on architects and before they've gone hard on closing for a purchase price for real estate, they're more inclined to do things that they might not be doing when you ask them right before the second board meeting before approval and where they're ready to start bidding out the job. If you get to them out early and up front, the cost is going to be much less and people are more amenable to those kinds of things, which is why I think we need to get to the education up front.
What about construction debris? Where is that supposed to go? Because I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and increasingly some developers are looking at ways to break up on site. That's one. Another piece is waste diversion, and there's rebuilding groups that will come and salvage pieces of material and go to other places. wood floors is like I mean, just as an example, you cannot build homes with the kind of wood floors that were built 100 years ago. So those planks of wood are in huge demand for people to put in their homes. So there's a market for that has been slowly building over the past few years. I'm generally a fan of finding ways for certain structures rehab or remodel, because there's all that stored energy, all that energy that was created maybe 100 years ago, 50 years ago to build a home or a structure. It's all in there, and to tear it down, you lose so much of that. So certainly rehab, but sometimes buildings that were built 100 years ago can't accommodate modern needs. They're not accessible. They're not safe. They're not energy efficient. So finding ways to retrofit is certainly a priority, but making sure that we're diverting a lot of that waste, and we know it's possible. So encouraging developers, again, up front, think about where that waste, if you're going to tear down that building, where it's going to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johanna. The last item from staff presentation standpoint is just a very brief update on one of the last quick impact items, if you will, that was in your agenda packet for this evening, which is with respect to electric vehicles. And there are two actions that we wanted to highlight for the board very quickly. The first of those is a quick start action item in the sustainability plan is for the village to become or receive a designation as a, quote, EV-ready community, which is a Metro Mayor's Caucus program, which relates to having a village staff member receive technical training in this program. The purpose of the program is very similar to the village's Soul Smart program. It's about putting into place a regulatory framework for the village that encourages deployment of EV charging infrastructure. So it puts into place, there are about 10 areas of measure in which the village goes through and evaluates its code, its zoning code, ranging from the village's commitment to becoming EV ready, zoning and planning, permitting and inspection. There are standards that relate to safety and training relating to our public safety personnel and their ability to handle charging station and electric vehicle issues, parking and access, new construction standards, EV owner rights, municipal fleets, utility engagement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the village Public Works Department has submitted an application for one of our employees to be included in the first training cohort that the Metro Mayor's Caucus is offering, which begins in early December. So we're very pleased about that, and more to follow on that, but we're very pleased to be able to move forward with that, and we look forward to gaining that expertise and then being able to help apply those standards and get ourselves certified, hopefully at a very high level. The second thing I wanted to touch on is with respect to the development of a municipal fleet inventory and electric vehicle transition implementation plan. That is also one of our phase one goals in the sustainability plan. It's kind of ideal timing for us, actually, because we have a couple things happening. Our vehicle acquisitions from a capital standpoint are extremely slow right now. We have vehicles that we've ordered as much as a year ago that are still somewhere out in Ford Motor Company, in particular, limbo. And we are being, in fact, told in one case that, well, if your vehicle doesn't show up within a month, then we might just cancel your order altogether. That's kind of how it goes. So we're seeing extremely long lead times. We're seeing, obviously, as anybody who's tried to buy a car lately knows, you're seeing extremely high prices. And particularly right now for either hybrid vehicles or more particularly all electric vehicles, pricing and availability is very difficult right now. For all those reasons, it's actually pretty ideal time to take advantage of this to look at our EV transition plan with the newly approved plan. For those that aren't familiar with the village's budget cycle, we are just in the getting ready to begin the capital budget process, which we typically kick off on the capital side. about the first week of December. So we're filling a position in the Public Works Department, and when we fill that position here in the next couple of weeks, this will be an immediate project for the person in that position to begin to develop this plan. And so that's something that this village board will hear more detailed discussion on in this upcoming budget cycle. So this will be taking a view of the village's entire fleet, the current replacement plan and life cycles for those vehicles, and then considering the question of which of those vehicles electrify and when, as well as what are the charging station deployment needs to support that electrification at what village facilities, and get those coordinated. And then what funding needs does that necessitate? And how can we, how could more funding availability alter the time sequence of that plan? So those are two of our more immediate priorities from a vehicle standpoint.
So we might be able to access some of the federal Infrastructure Act funding, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we hope so. I mean, the charging infrastructure that's out there right now is not necessarily targeted at us, but we expect it to be soon. The most recent state release of funds was related to fast chargers, which was geared towards the private sector for development, although it could be developed on property that we own, but it couldn't be operated by us. But nonetheless, as Ted said, there will be certainly a lot of funding opportunities out there circulating around for charging infrastructure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The village board next Monday will take up a discussion on the sustainability plan and take a vote on the plan. Does anybody have any concluding comments on the sustainability? Yes, sir.
I don't know if it was appropriate to speak before or not. I think this is fascinating. I'm very, very encouraged to hear about all this. I'm a resident of Skokie for 6 years now. I'm thrilled that there's such a proactive plan. But I just wanted to speak, one small detail that I'd really like to mention is, can we please consider including getting rid of these gas-powered leaf blowers?
Yes.
They are a detriment to our community.
I'm going.
Mentally and physically on so many levels. I didn't realize just how detrimental they were to our children and to our health physically. Mentally, it's obvious, but I would really be so
I think we talked about that. I think that, are you the gentleman I had the conversation? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought. No, I had a conversation.
Now we're working in our homes more, and they're just right around us all the time. It's very
You're preaching to the converted. And yes, as a matter of fact, we're working on a proposed ordinance in that direction. Yes, sir.
At Monday's meeting, are we gonna be able to have an input about, what we're talking about today? You know?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The way I think we'll do it is I will ask for a motion to accept and to implement the sustainability plan as presented this evening and in the document that we have. And I'm assuming I'll get a motion and a second. And then I'm going to ask each of the trustees, in order starting with trustee Sucker and concluding with trustee Klein, give each one a chance to make their comments, ask questions. We will have staff, et cetera, here that evening. And then I will open it for public comment, and then the board will start taking votes. And we will, if the board wishes, we can vote to accept and implement the plan. I don't know if anybody's going to propose amendments or what, but, and then there will be a second vote. We promised the Sustainability Commission that there would be a separate vote to eliminate the second garbage pickup per week. And so we will take a vote, a recorded vote on that as well. So, yes, I think yes.
I move we adjourn.
We are adjourned. And thank the committee, the planning committee, and for all of your work. Thank you.